YANA Social Impact webinar. I'm Rachel Littman, YANA's Executive Director. Tonight's program, What is Public Art, is hosted by YANA's Bay Area chapter and moderated by the Bay Area chapter leader, Eleanor Pepples. Now, before I hand the mic over to Eleanor, I just want to remind everyone, we are recording the program. It'll be available in a video format on our YouTube channel and in a podcast form on Buzzsprout and on Spotify. We will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat functions, which you should be able to find in your Zoom toolbar throughout the program to help you out. And further ado, I want to hand the mic over to Eleanor. It's all yours. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Rachel. So in these stressful times, witnessing geopolitical strife and learning what we can and cannot influence in a world rife with conflict and suffering, one wonders, where can we find solace and hope and perspective? I believe that one antidote to destruction is creation, and though it cannot cure pandemics or offer refuge to the oppressed or heal the wounded, somehow in the origin and existence of art, in our very reflection upon it, we can exist even for a moment in other realities and possibilities beyond our own lives. This evening, here from our democracy in Northern California's beautiful Bay Area, we invite you to join our conversation on the value of public art. What does it matter to society? What counts? How do artists reflect upon its power to engage audiences? And when foundations are involved, how do they decide which art and artists to support? And is there diversity on all sides? And how are Yalies and nonprofits making a difference? Again, as Rachel said, to all of you in the audience, nationally and internationally, welcome. We're delighted you've taken time to join us live or in the rebroadcast of this program. And we very much look forward to fielding your questions throughout the program. I hope you'll put them in the chat and indicate to whom you want them addressed. I'd also like to quickly thank, this is starting to sound like the Oscars, but I'd like to thank the organizations and individuals that helped make this program possible, from the Yale Club of San Francisco and its president, Rahul Prasad, and staff, to the Yale Alumni Association, the Yale Department of the History of Art, the Yale School of Art and Architecture, of course to YANA, all for promoting it, and to the individuals on my team who are helping me lead the Bay Area chapter of YANA, and to my family who have offered encouragement and insights along the way. It's my distinct honor to introduce two leading lights in the art world who have kindly given their time to converse with us about public art, its creation, value, meaning, and funding. Their bios are found in the announcement for this program, and as time is limited, I encourage you to check the links. My good friend Chong Bin Zhang here, Chongbin, do you want to wave? Has an international reputation as one of the top 50 living Chinese artists creating today. His exceptional range of work and projects are well documented on his website, and if you Google his name and images, you'll find some of the spectacular creations he has made. And there's no substitute for seeing them in person. He's going to share some visuals of his work with us. He's also known as Zheng Chongbin in Asia and around the world. And upon hearing his thoughts and witnessing his art, I think you'll understand why he's known in virtually every contemporary art world setting. And I have to credit my Yale education professors, Richard Barnhart and Jonathan Spence, for helping me spot his genius the very first time I saw it in a gallery in San Francisco as a recent Yale grad. Also, we're joined by Ted Russell, established and highly regarded figure in foundation circles. He is Director of Arts and Strategy and Ventures, Art Strategy and Ventures at the Kenneth Rainin Foundation in Oakland, California. His remarkable career is captured in his bios, and like me, he's a proud Yalie. He also holds a BA in Arts Management from UCLA's Anderson School of Business Administration. So without further ado, I'll turn to you, Chongbin. Why have you chosen to add public art to your legacy?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for introductions. I think we can avoid it in terms of public art, the idea, the notion to me, the public art. Just like this form of now, we are communicating with people, virtual, visible, and invisible. That sort of in another form of a public communications. But to me, it's always important. As artist, you working at a studio is one thing. That's where a lot of ideas starting outside of studio with your life, and then you go back to studio to try to understand how you perceive things and how you try to grasp that sort of way that how you can presenting that language. But then it will goes out of studio again to the public, and so. To me, there's a notion of a public art. They always expand and should not be limited in terms of what I think about public art in the form of outside of the studio. But I wanted to, it's because of limited time. I'm just going to pick up a few projects that I've done in the past, and so a lot of the time. You will see the public art is in a park and in the squares. And so these are one kind of the way how I see it in terms of public art. But I also very much into the public art in terms of how I think about the site has very much of importances for the artwork to kind of grow into the site. Is sort of have this kind of sort of whole ecosystems that art pieces would be actually living in that places, and so the fact of dealing with the world in terms of as independently, art is interconnected with the human beings, but also interconnected with the non-human beings, which is the environment and the places. How you sort of see it as a part of this world that we can actually experience. Just like we're going to going hiking, when I see each time I will see things that how fascinating we're connected, but also independently, things are how actually evolves and then there many years ago. Before even we exist. So, but that's sort of the idea, the concept of thinking. I'm going to share the screen. You can see it. Can you see it? Okay, great. Yeah. So this is the 2018 in Chicago. Many of you may know it's the MART, and so it's the 1930s buildings. It's historical buildings, a landmark in Chicago, and so the city of Chicago. This, as I was saying, that there's so much history in these buildings, and also the city of Chicago decided turning the buildings into the public art face. And so it's a public art programs and foundations that is really supported their programs and to really bring the life into this front of Chicago rivers and whole areas. So it's a building facade is it's a 22,600 square meter, which is huge. And so when we started, it was the inaugural sort of 4 artists, 2 from Chicago, 2 from California. And so we created actually, each one of us created about 5 to 6 minutes of footage. And then also we had created the algorithms, the afterwards, which is not which artists are dedicated to these buildings, to starting these programs, but also the later for anyone wants to, people in the buildings or anyone wants to put image, they can actually drop into the image and the algorithm will figure that out and then sort of plays on its on the rotations. So everybody actually could participate other than, you know, inviting artists to do the work. So this is sort of unprecedented sort of scale that it's taking on, and has 40 projectors and covers, you know, the huge, it's 2 million lumens. So there is a lot of work was involved in it, but it certainly is really changed the entire face of the approach of, changed the entire approach of how the public art, which is became a part of a cityscape, and it's a really this is let me sorry. You can see how many people turn out, and so it's a really it's a amazing experience for everyone. This is the projector you can see Hope around the riverside that's built permanently. That program, which is yearly now, it's every summers will run through several months. I think it's from the March and all the way to the almost in the end of the years. And so far, since 2008, there was many artists who has been invited to create a work for these buildings, and which it displays the whole message and idea, not only visually engaging and a lot of messages like what current artists, how artists and public view their life and the current situations and everything. So it's really built part of the, not only in the building itself, but the site became entire social kind of ecologies and entire message, and then sort of became part of, you know, people's life. And I think that's very important in terms of it's existed in there, the work. And yeah, this is the daytime views of the buildings. And again, with artists created, we always would think about it, how the characters of the buildings, how we use the buildings, the geometry, how we use the facade, and how integrated into the buildings. So it's really sort of renewal, kind of a sense of the history, but it also renewal this, the time and the space is sort of move on, and it's sort of continuous. It's sort of the vital sort of energies. Let me go to the next one. Oops. Sorry. I'll go to the next let me see here. Next one is let me see here. Image. This one is in Kyoto. I did in also it's about a year-long project. It's in World Heritage Space. It's called Kenneth. It's the one of oldest, actually, is the oldest temples in Kyoto, Zen Temples in Kyoto. And so this is the overview of the Kenneth. And so I, being sort of fortunate enough to be invited to work on the one of the chambers in the place and temples. But then as I understand it more, see it more, through my yearly visit every year's actually been back and forth during that years in 2018. I realized that the space I really wanted, it really shows how that.
Excuse me, can I interrupt you for a moment? What we're seeing are all the images. Can you select them as you had before when you were showing your work on the MART?
Say that again.
So in your shared screen, so we are just seeing the JPEGs versus what we had seen before.
Oh, no. Can you see it on the screen now? The changing image? No.
Chongbin, you may need to stop sharing and then reshare it. It doesn't always.
Okay.
You almost had it.
I'll stop share and now it's again. Let me see share. How about now?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize. Okay. Yeah. So this is the Kenjinji, the Zen Temples, which oldest Zen temple is in Kyoto. As I mentioned that I discovered this main chambers, which is the open to public. So it's the Buddhas, the Zen masters always, priests always doing the ceremonies a year long. And so I realized the reason that I wanted to do that is that my experience, which is with dealing with environmental issues, in Kyoto particularly, is an amazing place, which is how the city lays out based on the underground waters channels, based on the whole orientation of how the landscape is situated. And so the temple is certainly reflected on that kind of idea of see how the season can be changed and to be realized, and all the way around gardens, in the gardens, the court, and also the entire inside of interior open panels. It's how this whole sort of each entity is connected. And so the visitors coming and really sort of encouraged to work in the space, both outside and inside, and sort of in this kind of flow of what I call the liquid space, which is nothing really settles. You have to be in there. Your bodily experience is extremely important. But the 2009, the huge typhoon season in Asia, which is really never happened in Kyoto, which is only landed in Osaka, but this goes towards inland and destroy a lot of gardens. So I was there during the time every other month. I sort of want to go through this, study the site, and you realize, the moss gets totally dry and usually rarely happen. But the dry, it's sort of drought. It's kind of, it causes the moss sort of readapting its textures and the way of growing. So so I decided that doing the light space work in there is to really take a panel, replace the panel, of course, it's sitting on the side, and then recreate a theme. The theme that I wanted to really can be sort of how I kind of perceive, bring the elements that can be realized not from inside, but also from outside, using a scrim, use sort of transparent panels, and use the patterns, and sometimes it's mainly use a light to really bring the exchange kind of outside to the inside in the way that how create a sequence as you walk in a space, you can actually really visually experience. For example, this one would be actually the geometry of the acrylic panels, which is installed in the open structures windows, window panels, windows. You can see through the landscape. You can also see the reflection, bring the sky into the space, and then all you can see through as well. So there is multiple dimensions that can really see it. But not only that, it has so much visitors coming through the space, and so it really give them sense of an idea and experience of how we looking at the each different orientation in the wall, which is some of the walls already opened up the panel and reinstalled with a light filtered screen and also perforated kind of a panel that I actually, the way I kind of invented to create a lot of apertures that actually it can really see through, see the how the garden is really has different layers in the that interact with the light and the particularly this. I do realize that, let me show you, this is the one of the tokonoma space I reinstalled. They wanted me to redesign the space, which is install the, I did install LED panels, live stream of outside the water basins. One of the interesting fact I may wanted to, oh here. Can you see screen of this video? On the screen, the live videos?
We're not getting the live one yet.
All right, okay. Let me explain to you. What you see on the screen right now is the surface of the water basin, where the halfway you see it in the bottom, halfway is a reflection of the sky. And so when I was looking outside, I see the water basin has water reflected the roof lines, which is, and when actually wind breathe, when it has a breathe and it causes all the ripple effect on the water surface and cause the entire roof line starting shifting and move. And all these sort of natural phenomenon energies. And to me, is very important part of like living entities of all happened around the gardens. So I wanted to bring that sort of zoom into that season live stream bring to the inside in that experience. Let me show you the one of this example. So now you probably can see it, the video I'm playing.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So this is actually how it moves in the water and the reflection of roof lines. And so it's became the entire abstract patterns. You can see the sky. So this has became sort of the real living images from outside, which is live stream happened. This is all the ripple happened on the surface of the water. So and then one last, I hope not take too much time. Let me see. Oops. Sorry. Let me share the screen again. The last project I wanted. Oh, here. Can you see it on the new screen?
Not yet.
Not yet? Oh. Sorry. Let me restart again. How about now? You can see it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the way I'm mentioning about it in Kyoto, which is to me is it's you know, it's I do project in the corporate buildings and in the actual the park, and also doing that in the museum space. But then also you do with the school and even local schools. And so, and this is the work done in the Shanghai Contemporary Art Museums called the Powerhouse. So this work I had created in the different places. I recreated this one called the Wall of the Sky, which is the light space installation. Basically, it's a rebuilt space inside. So the idea is, to me, is in terms of the pieces which is inside the museum, but then also in parallel inside, you look in the space, you can actually see what outside the buildings from the sideways. And so it really, it actually brought a lot of visitors And so idea to me that, you know, I use this work as an example is because it's not to me in the outside of public area, but even in the institutional space. And I view it also, it's that notion of boundary between the public art and actually the art, the installation works in the museums. And it's, you know, basically I wanted to create an environment that people can interact with, and they can actually really gain a new experience of how things that how things evolve and how things change through the art medias, and how I want to convey that message. Basically, these pieces I use the ink and to really work on the ink, and first the ink work on the papers, and that paper is sort of penetratable. All the ink can settle through, just like how how the land forms, how things are sort of behaves, because the water pushes all the ink. It really create in the settlement in the bottoms. The settlement and became almost crystallized, and I used that sheets, the settlement, and remounted on the silk, and then created structures in that geometry, entire structures, and then mounted the entire piece on it. Now they are also light reflective, so entire room is built based upon that pieces. So nothing is a street, but you walk in, it's actually, it flows, entire light, which became real tangible materials that you can actually enact, you can actually sense the pieces. One of the, I want to show you the last one that you can actually see the videos. Okay. Let me see the video pieces. Sorry. No. Okay, I think okay, you can see it now? Can you see now? Yeah. So this is the whole process of how I make that entire pieces through time lapse. So we literally have to rebuild rooms, and so reconfiguration of the whole shape of geometry in the space. And those front panels, which is above, is redesign layout 35 LEDs, have to rebuild the ceiling and every reflective materials, including the floor. And you can see the side view where the city view is. So it's the wall of the sky. It's really about sort of questioning, and really it's about sort of the idea of in a poetic means, in many way of thinking about the sky, but then also the way of how we sort of in relation to that expand your ideas. This is the whole time lapse, how we build the pieces for that. And so many audience walk in and just they have keep constantly flow moving, and then go closer and go from a distance. So it's really sort of, that's how I think about a public art, that is really you engaging with the people is in any different ways, and ability to really become part of their experience if they can take it away from the piece. And so yeah, I'll leave right in here. So I think I take too long. Thank you.
Goodness, Chongbin, as far as I'm concerned, you could go on and on. I so enjoyed what you had to say, and so just respect your process, and certainly the incredible result. So you'll enjoy this, Chongbin, in the chat room. Do you know what questions they have for you? They ask nothing, which means you've covered everything. But there is one comment, which is that in looking at your work, stunning.
Oh, thank you.
So And you know, we do have, actually, I just saw another one saying so amazing. So, and you know, we have Ted too, given all of his work in foundations and all of the public art that he has sponsored over the years. I'm interested in his reaction too. Were you as blown away as I was?
Just completely. Chongbin, amazing. I know of your reputation, a bit about the work, but to get the insights into your process, the sense of nature, creating an environment, the experiences you created and just shared with us, that was really delightful. I feel like one of the honors I get sometimes, you know, working as a funder, every once in a while I get the presentation from a curator of a piece, or we get to work with artists, but there's nothing like really having the time with an artist laying out their aspiration. And my favorite thing is when the artwork achieves the level of the aspiration, and I was just completely blown away. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you.
I think most of the audience is feeling the same way. I think just breathing and appreciating, you know, how inspirational it is. So I suspect we'll get more Q&As. We have a lot of people who've tuned in tonight, so we'll see. If any more come up, I'll let you know. So Ted, will you tell us a little bit about your world and your perspective on public art and what counts and what matters and how you choose among all of the extraordinary artists out there, you know, who is funded, and then where do these works, what communities are chosen for them?
Absolutely. I thought before I focused on Rayner and our foundation, I'd give just a, you know, little zero-in hit on the definition of public art, because that's always in debate and yet kind of centers us. And I thought instead of just focusing on Rainin, I'd also talk about a couple of really influential national funders working in public art, the Mellon Foundation and Bloomberg Philanthropies. And then I'll focus on our humble little foundation. I work with Kenneth Rainin Foundation. We're headquartered in Oakland, California. Depending on how you count, we're a small to mid-sized foundation with about $600 million in assets, which leads to us grant making across 3 programs at about $30 million a year. So, you know, we're a small player, but I thought I'd give you some of the national dialogue. And first of all, I just wanted to pick out a definition, and people have their own definitions, but just to kind of center it. So here's one. Public art is art in any media whose form, function, and meaning are created for the general public through a public process. And I thought I wanted to highlight that because a lot of people focus on public art and they can think of murals, sculptures, other things. But what's exciting about public art today, as we just saw from Chongbin, is that artists across disciplines are working out in public space. A lot of what we look at is how public art is accessible to the public, but that can also be indoors as well as outdoors. And that it's interesting because we have so much happening with the world of advertising, taking over our eyeballs everywhere, right? But we do distinguish public art from commercial art, partisan advertising, you know, really personal things. And then there's an interesting debate. I'd love to hear what folks think about that. Please weigh in. There's debate in the field. Is graffiti public art? I live in Oakland, California. I'm from LA originally. I lean towards including it, but there's plenty of people who don't. And yet we started now in major museums to see exhibitions that do incorporate graffiti artists and their writing, as they call it. So I don't know, I just wanted to give some of that sense of it because these things are often discussed, and it's nice to have a broader sense. For me, the reason I'm into this, art is about inspiration, revelation. It can be about the historic, right? It can be about the religious. art can be about the avant-garde, right? And the revolutionary. It has that range of human expression. And I always think about it, art has this ability somehow to help communicate from soul to soul. And so when an artist works in public at a public scale, communicating with the public, I actually think it's rather profound. And I've been moved to think about it differently just in these recent years. I thought I'd just briefly touch on what's happening with monuments, which are a distinct aspect of public art, and just zeroed in on the author Isabel Wilkerson, who I met while she was writing her great book, The Warmth of Other Suns. Many of you may know her from her time writing at the New York Times. Her most recent book, Cast, really delved into all these issues beyond how we typically think of race in the United States. And I love that she had a chapter that really focused on the symbols of caste and focused on the Robert E. Lee statue in Charlottesville and all that came with that. And obviously, we're all aware of that. And I'll only make a mention as a person who calls himself now a Hopperite, but I will always be a Hoonie. I'll only make a passing mention of John C. Calhoun, our vice president who defended slavery. I believe his treatise was Slavery as a Positive Good, which I think is positively bad, but this is part of the debate. And so, right, and we think about a real history where the only there have been reparations around slavery. People ignore this, right? We talk about reparations. The reparations that have happened were for the enslavers. So there have been reparations previously. It's not like we've been without them. Oh, Rachel, thank you for including that. And the thing I just highlight from that debate is Mayor Mitch Landrieu at the time in New Orleans just said, statuary can be political weapons. So I just wanted to reflect on how public art is not this benign thing that you may or may not notice. It can be ambient, but it can be really meaningful in our society. And just to reflect on the fact that there are 1,700 Confederate monuments across our nations, right? That Robert E. Lee appeared on 5 stamps, right? And he had his own slaves, and his preferred treatment of them was to whip them with 50 lashes and a wash of brine should they misbehave. But even though what he committed was an act of treason, he faced very few penalties for that treason, and he's still celebrated. And Jefferson Davis has a presidential library, and yet you can look at alternate treatments in Germany, which paved over Hitler's gravesite so that folks wouldn't celebrate it, right? And display a swastika is punishable by 3 years of imprisonment. So we can just look at history and think about some of the importance of it. So some take public art lightly, but I don't. I want to talk about briefly about the largest project we see now in this area at the Andrew Mellon Foundation. In 2020, they launched the Monuments Project. This is a $250 million commitment to reimagining and rebuilding commemorative space. It'll be a 5-year project. It's one of the signature initiatives under President Elizabeth Alexander, if you recognize the name. She was a contemporary of mine at Yale. She's been brilliant. And Eleanor, we'll do what we can to bring her into one of these spaces sometime for a conversation. I believe she is one of the true visionaries in the philanthropic field. And I'm just so pleased that she's personally focused as a poet, not just on the arts as part of her work, but on public art. Basically, those monument project grants focus on 4 areas of activity. They fund new monuments and memorials and historic storytelling in space. They also offer opportunities to contextualize existing monuments, and whether that's through installations or actual research and education to provide context to the monuments that exist. In some cases, they do support relocation of existing monuments as part of a reparative action. And especially if that's a community-driven vision for a particular site, that's when they'll support it. And last but not least, in order to help inform the public about monuments, they will help fund books, films, websites that help people understand the commemorative landscape and how we teach our history. So just to briefly touch on it, their first grants were about $10 million towards monuments, which included, let me find the list here, the Emmett Till Interpretive Center in the Mississippi Delta, the the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, which has a set of public programming, a $1.2 million project called Monumental Perspectives, looking at using AR, augmented reality, to help bring untold perspectives to some local communities. There's the Massachusetts Design Group, Mass Design Group, which has a public memory and memorial lab that will support organizations working on memorialization projects. Two more, Prospect New Orleans, which will have a citywide exhibition highlighting monuments across the city of New Orleans. And last but not least, Spark, the Social and Public Art Resource Center, is going to preserve one of the great pieces from my hometown, Los Angeles, by Judy Baca, called The Great Wall of Los Angeles. And it's a monument to interracial harmony. Just briefly, let me read a quote here from Elizabeth Alexander. "Monuments and memorials powerfully shape our understanding of our country's past and determine which narratives we honor and celebrate in the American story. Future generations ought to inherit an inclusive commemorative landscape that elevates the visionary contributions and remarkable experiences of the many different communities that make up the United States. With these 5 grants, we are affirming our commitment to support organizations engaged in creating and contextualizing monuments and memorials that convey the extraordinary multiplicity of our complex history." So I'm really proud of her and this work. Let's see, I want to start sharing my screen to give you some of the visuals since we are talking about art here. So just give me a second. Hopefully I can do as well here. Okay. All right. Am I sharing the screen, and can you see a statue of Robert E. Lee?
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to highlight that. Obviously, you all have seen this very points if you paid attention to the news in the past few years. To highlight the award to the Emmett Till Memory Project, I thought I would show Mr. Till's final resting spot as part of this, but now I want to move on to Bloomberg Philanthropies and their incredible work in public art, which is just completely blown me away here. Oh shoot, is that coming up? Do you see anything?
There
Bloomberg,
it is, yep.
Oh, good, thank goodness. I just always confirm and reconfirm. Quickly look at this. You all know the former mayor, Michael Bloomberg, has an amazing foundation. They work in a lot of areas internationally. In the United States, one of their great contributions is their Public Art Challenge, where they have mayors partner with artists. They focus on the creative sector and looking at significant urban issues. I will just quickly highlight some of the projects. And what I'd like to highlight is just this idea of what is the range of what public art can be, and to think about the cities across the country that competed, so very many, just incredible. So they've had multiple rounds of this, but I thought I'd highlight just a few of the projects from the initial Bloomberg Challenge. And I'll just be really quickly with these because you can visit them yourself. In the city of Anchorage, there's a partnership called the Seed Lab, and that brings together artists, designers, engineers, and community members to embed energy efficient solutions into city planning. And so they're basically working with a neglected building downtown, and they're going to turn it into a civic arts center, but everyone's going to focus on energy and community. And I mean, I just love that one of the first awards was in Alaska, which is the largest state, right? Twice as large as Texas, and yet often forgotten in our national dialogue. So I love that they went there. And once again, I'll just move quickly because I really invite you to check these out for yourself on the Bloomberg.org site. Another piece in Camden, New Jersey, called A New View. The city of Camden is transforming illegal dumping in arts and changing dumping lots into art spaces. So the idea basically is to create a visual narrative in these sites where there's often dumping along the major highways. Insert your own what exit joke here, but think about using these spaces that are where people have been dumping things in the lots and having a community forum and arts installations in ways for a community of 65,000 to actually have their own visual narratives portrayed. I'll just dive into one more quickly because it's just of such national relevance. There's a whole longer set of these. In Coral Springs, Florida, of course, we remember the Parkland shootings, and this is about inspiring community healing after gun violence using the power of art. And Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School will help create artworks that will bring about the community's vision of change and hope for the future. The idea of an art therapy program at a public scale, I think, is truly revolutionary. So actually, I won't skip the last one, you know, no insult to Jackson, Mississippi and their important food access project, but just because I have family that was and is in Tulsa, one of the most important projects that I've seen was the Greenwood Art Project, and basically focusing on the historic district, the Black Wall Street, that was bombed in the greatest urban terrorism we've seen in the United States. Incredible artwork. So I'll just keep moving, but the range of projects, the range of cities, the idea of communities engaging together in public art, led by the mayor, focused with certain artists, I think just gives you a scale, a sense of the scale of possibility of public art. And I just wanted to share that with you briefly. I'll now go to our foundation, the Kenneth Rayner Foundation. Like I said, we're based in Oakland, California. We fund in health also, internationally with research, in medical research. Locally, we focus on schools, the Oakland schools and K through 3 literacy projects, and in art, we focus in San Francisco and Oakland. And our public art program is designed to impact the broader field, but focus on projects here locally. And the projects are all over the place. There is sculpture. There's sculpture, including virtual reality, there's storytelling, there's performance. So many art forms have been part of the applications, and there's so many things that are happening. In our most recent set of grants, we have a project that's focused on the local native tribe, which is still here and alive, despite the fact that so many were slaughtered and had bounties on their head that were in part supported by the state of California. But there's a Ohlone language restoration public art project. There's elements of the Black experience that are being uplifted. Our Asian and Latinx communities are being highlighted through projects. So I will try to keep it relatively brief because I also want to give you a sense of what's happening. But just to give you a sense here, here's a project that's not far from my neighborhood called the Commons Archive. And I'm actually wondering, Chongbin, if you know this artist, Sue Marks, because she's spent a great amount of time in Asia, very influential. She did a project with a local library in the Golden Gate community, where the idea was to bring together the community, which is experiencing gentrification, bring together the new folks who are moving in, give them a sense of history, using materials in the library, but then helping the long-term Black community celebrate their excellence, and to bring the community together at the library, which are now sites more often of art projects and community connectivity, and helping that community bring itself together by understanding both its history and the newcomers. Just to highlight one particular project. And quickly, I will share just a few minutes from an interesting project led by a group called Youth Speaks, which leads this incredible poetry and youth slams, and they help celebrate national awards. Check out a youth poetry competition in your community if you haven't, because not only are they the future and all the platitudes, but the power of spoken word in the hands of youth is so remarkable. I've never regretted attending one of these events. What they decided to do in partnership at Youth Speaks with other groups located in San Francisco, Youth Speaks in San Francisco and Oakland, and also the city of Richmond, is bring together youth from different programs, have them bring their performing arts and storytelling for a ride on our BART subway system, starting in Richmond and performing in a car of the BART, which was not 100% approved by the BART agency. They tried, and they just decided to go renegade. I went for a ride, don't tell anyone. And it was amazing to ride over to the Mission District, historically Latino district, and to have those youth performing along the way, free to the public, people who just happened to get in the car or just had their jaws dropping. I'll just play a few seconds of this, and I don't know whether you hear the audio. Hopefully the visuals are compelling for you. Actually, I can probably blow this up too. Imagine getting on your subway car and seeing this, or outside of a platform, seeing dancers, youth making music, and also telling their stories. And the nature of the We So Bay project was to have youth talk about the Bay Area. It was, the concept was essentially to produce a book, if you will, to tell the story of the Bay Area in different chapters represented by these youth groups. And it was really brilliant, inspiring. I've never seen anything like it. And once again, yet another cutting edge public art piece. So here at Rainin, our grants are on a smaller scale than Bloomberg, smaller scale than Mellon. We focus on temporary public art pieces that are relevant to local communities. We have artists partner with nonprofits. The grants can range anywhere from $10,000 to $200,000. It has been challenging during the pandemic. We suspended the program at one point. We're able to make a set of grants this year that I spoke about briefly. And it's really about primarily outdoor sites, occasionally indoor sites, accessible to the public, and using the imagination. Our idea is, with all the art that we fund at the Kenneth Rain Foundation, is to push the boundaries of what arts can be, in hopes that Bay Area artists will continue to thrive. And this will be one of the great art centers of the world, as long as we can help support that. Groups have to, artists do have to partner with a 50C13C nonprofit technically to be part of it. Let me just think of other aspects, and just little things, right? They actually have to have approval from the property owner for a site. There's other certain restrictions. We help with workshops to actually connect the artists and nonprofits with our local agencies in San Francisco and Oakland. There are public art representatives in each of those agencies. And just to give you a sense of the criteria we look at, we actually are looking for evidence that there's a mutually beneficial partnership between the artist and the nonprofit. We want these to be timely and compelling projects, not just kind of art on its own for its own sake, even though that's incredibly meaningful for sometimes, but we want to focus on projects that are of the moment as much as we can reflect that. We want the site and the unique context of the site to be reflected in the vision. And we always want a thoughtful approach to community engagement and how the community is part of approving, helping develop. I'm dog sitting my girlfriend's dog, so if you hear barking, shaking, or anything else, she's having a reaction to our criteria. We also look at the rigor and impact of past work and look at the ability for a group to execute the project. So those are a lot of things we look at. Well thought out projects require a lot of communication, coordination. It's helpful in some cases where we're looking at where an artist focuses on their audience, but there's a lot of public art that that's not what it's about. If an artist can express themselves, it doesn't always have to be relevant. It could just be personal expression, but I thought I would just share how we've been looking at it at Rainin. And you know, if you think about some of the larger scale events, even to think about an artist like Ai Weiwei, who had an Alcatraz project that was about freedom of expression, and part of the project was sending postcards to people being held as political prisoners. There were 900,000 visitors to Alcatraz who went for that event or otherwise. Out of those 900,000 visitors, 90,000 postcards were sent to prisoners of conscience. There was a space of reflection. It was named, the project was named as an Amnesty International Ambassador of Conscience. And for Alcatraz, which it's hard to get on one of the boats out to Alcatraz, while the project was up, they had a 71% increase of Bay Area visitors, locals who don't always go, went to Alcatraz to see this. Their sales increased 14% overall. It was just an amazing project, named one of the best of the year by Huffington Post, Architectural Digest, Artsy. Kickstarter named it a project and contributed $400,000 to help hire the art guide. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the range of what happens there, and in the impact of a large-scale art project. And I love public art. I hope you all have at least become even more interested than you were before we started the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ted. You've certainly opened my eyes and, you know, given me such a broad range that of different kinds of, you know, performance art, obviously, that is part of public art. And you even think of flash mobs and, you know, some of the protests, you know, in different ways that they've been expressed. You know, I even wonder about tagging. I know somebody who feels pretty passionately that that is art. And I have seen some that is remarkable. You know, we see that out here on the West Coast, and I'm sure in a number of cities. We have gotten a lot of different questions in, and here's one for you, Ted. I'm pretty sure it's for you. Was Keith Haring's Subway and Bus Stop, were those works considered graffiti? And also, is that true of the Bushwick Collective? So we're putting you on the spot, Ted. What do you think?
I don't know if I am the person who gets to make that decision. I would say a lot of Haring's work was considered graffiti, and yet now is understood as public art. Chongbin, I'd actually rather hear your opinion than mine.
Well, I think, you know, I mean, in terms of the categories, our historians, critic, will be categorizing it as a graffiti art as during the movement in the part of history in that time, and 70s, 80s, but if we look at the notion of a public art, talking about this, how it reaches out, expanding that notions. You know, as you mentioned, that you don't need to get a permit to get on the BART and the subway to do the performances, and people likes it. And then those, it can consider as underground, but the form of it is still really a public art. It actually it really sort of showing how much open access, openly we can think that way, because I don't think we should have set boundaries in terms of, you know, in the public art. Some are certainly is more done in a very organized way by institution, but some are very spontaneous just by the communities and by individual. And you know, it's many different way of, you know, inspiring, and also the art evolves in a graffiti, and then a lot of graffiti now became mainstream art too. So there's also crossing sort of I would call it pollinizations. So, you know, it's like you all sort of can be really exchanged, and the form is very much free and open. Now I've talked about the actually back to the public art, and you and I was actually spoke that before. I talked to this before. Currently, the work at the Asian Art Museum, it's called I Look for Sky, which is it took me 2019 when curator asked me, and I was spending about 1.5 years to work on, and then during the pandemic time and city was locked down, was scheduled to open, and we couldn't install, and then until the November's, and all of a sudden there's windows that open, and the city was lifted all the restrictions partially, So we'd be able to jump in a 5 weeks time, day and night. We set place, which is in the lobby space, atrium, the space that is under the Gale Alante's, the architectures, the giant skylight. And if you've been to a museum, any people been to the museum and knowing, so, but the space is also very challenging too, because there's overwhelmed structures, light field certainly, which I love about. And so there's a lot of traffics, other than in the pandemic time was complete, you know, there's a lot less. There's also the signage and the museum stores. So it's very hard to use that space, but it's also intriguing because you don't particularly making the object, to me, you know, in my experience, that it is actually in thinking about public art. It's how you want to grow into that space, become part of the space. It's like plants just sort of grow this on the structures. And so it's really a part of, as I mentioned, like the ecologies and how you perceive that environment every day as people working there and, you know, passing, they don't really pay much attention into surroundings in that kind of the real sort of a vital, to me, is entity that is invisible, and then sort of make it into the visible. And so, and how that visible things can interact with the museum collections and with the people, and, you know, and beyond. So it's great because you can walk in without buying any ticket. It's, to me, that's even like better, because you don't, it's just open to public. You know, unless you're going to gallery to see the show, you have to purchase the pit ticket. But this is like open to public. Everybody can walk in the viewing. So, and I like this kind of, you know, museum now have a 1 day for free, open to the public. But this is really so accessible as long as the museum opening hours. And so the piece is still up. It's up. It's already a year and a half almost there already. And so I think it's a real honors to working during the pandemic time, and once the city is open, you see more people coming. Even open short period of time in a lockdown again, if you recall, and it's only open for 3 weeks, and then in the late November is lockdown again, and reopened. And the city reopened like almost to the February, because that's what my next installing schedule was in the gallery was started. So basically we took that window of the opportunity and open, and even limited people came. And I see how much they feel needs to get out and need to go to museum, need to go see the artworks. And so it was very special to me in a way. So.
Did you see the other question that I sent your way, Chongbin?
No.
In the chat? I think I sent it to you in the chat, but I can pull it out of the questions. Here we go. So there was one which Phil Falcone asked us, is it helpful to have, as part of visual public art, a multimedia component? And you certainly have addressed that. And I think anyone who wants to Google, I look for the sky and the SF Asian Art Museum, they have a nice video of it and discussion of it. I think that would answer that question. And then there's one asking about, do you believe, and I think you could each take this question on if you wanted. This is from Edgar Garcia. Do you believe augmented reality is explicitly public art when used as medium?
Ted?
Well, Duchamp is my hero, so if the artist declares it so, I do believe it to be. But Chongbin, I'd love to hear what you think.
Sure. I mean, the augmented reality is another new form of a visualization, and I think is just enriches the kind of a tour in a way how we can access directly in another kind of a virtual world. And I do happen in my to the tech partners who in my studio who are they are expert on that. So we had worked on some digital spectacle, digital art, the projections, but also always experimenting the space that we could actually create virtually and create a sort of develop a concept and create a sort of the way how more easy for the public to actually access it. And it's still relatively in the sort of the new area. But no, I believe that, you know, art and technologies, and this is definitely is a sort of exciting new form that is, I mean, you know, our histories keep evolving, and, you know, this is kind of to me, it's kind of part of the, I'm not an expert on that, but I think it's fascinating. So, you know, they're certainly exciting to use that, to see it, that the media, that it can actually really investigate and you know, see what's come out of it. So,
Chongbin, the way you were describing it actually reminded me of a fascinating project. I don't know if you all know of the Women's Building in the Mission District. It's a really important historic feminist center, which has this powerful mural on the side of women through history. And so there is an augmented reality project, which is also a work of art that allows the mural to come alive and for some aspect of the historic women's stories each to be told. If you have the app on your iPhone, you can then look at the mural and point it at the different figures, and basically their stories are then animated and come to life.
Right, yeah.
Wow, this has been such an excellent conversation, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. We didn't quite get to all the questions, but again, many thanks to you both, and also to our audience. So, I mean, this program has been so popular. I think we'll have to do it again, and, you know, keep expanding on different topics in art. And I'm just so honored to be in your company tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.